We do not need the federal government to lead the charge on research and development. Companies such as Panasonic or Matsushita would often mimic the advancements of industries through research and development in the United States. We do not need the federal government to lead the charge on research and development. This is Steve Gibson reporting recognition right now to Tiger Logic and their production value, despite the fact that I am the author of Logic's Dictate. Once again, it is merely coincidence. You might say that Tiger Logic, my production company, uses the word logic as well in terms of the name of logic in my novel. I would say, however, that there is not entire coincidence, because the analytical framework that is associated with my novel, Logic's Dictate, is probably a similar analytical framework to how Tiger Logic pursues its business activities, given how fabulous they are in producing and managing content flow. Let's get back to research and development. And again, there is a relationship between logic and what Rahm Emanuel is advocating in his recent article in the Wall Street Journal when it comes to research and development. And that's not being complimentary to Rahm Emanuel or his article. He fails to use logic when he is discussing research and development. What are we talking about when we're talking about research and development? What we're talking about on research and development is fundamental basic science and investigatory measures to bring about inventions, discoveries, and the like. For the most part, what we're talking about is R&D, research and development, that is going to bring about new technologies, new industries, and new developments that spur productivity and heighten our competitive capabilities as an economy in the United States. Research and development is extraordinarily important if we are going to be competitive and have an advancing economy. For the longest time, both certain aspects of the Japanese economy and certainly the Chinese economy lagged because of their inability to do research and development. Companies such as Panasonic or Matsushita would often mimic the advancements of industries through research and development in the United States and effectively pawn off what we were doing in the United States without their own indigenous research and development. What they were able to do is take manufacturing techniques and apply advanced and intensive manufacturing techniques based upon the United States inventions. Now, ever since the 1970s and 1980s, that has changed. The Japanese have become far more inventive, have filed far more patents, but that doesn't mean the United States has not been superior with respect to its private research and development industries. Again, private research and development and technological development is absolutely essential for any economy to maintain a competitive advantage, particularly in the age of computing and synthetic intelligence. What has recently been reported is that the Communist Party in China is allocating more of its funds to research and development. Well, that's all well and good. And they certainly have the capacity to increase and improve their research and development technology. But having government funding and government control over research and development is historically a failure. If you're not having a competitive, incentivized mentality with respect to research and development, you simply negate the fundamental human nature of bringing about the kind of invention and invention state that human nature has so ingeniously explored. If you have and apply fundamental economic incentives to the research and development arena, you are intrinsically going to heighten the human brain's incentive to become more imaginative, because you're orienting the human condition to take advantage of the research and development result. I'm not saying that in academia or in other disciplines that people are not incentivized to be creative and imaginative, but I am going to make the argument that history has concluded definitively and without question that if you apply, frankly, greedy economic incentive to any endeavor whereby the person that is engaging in the activity is going to be directly benefiting from that activity, then that person is going to work harder, work longer, work more creatively and ingeniously towards that result. Now, there's other circumstances where we have been incentivized to do so, whether it be going to the moon or creating the atomic bomb. There are certain endeavors that government involvement has been okay on. That having been said, Elon Musk and others have demonstrated that even the processes of space travel, putting satellites in space, doing other activities economically with respect to space, are done far more efficiently and effectively by the private sector rather than that with government involvement. That is a fundamental socioeconomic principle, which means that when Rahm Emanuel writes his article in the Wall Street Journal saying that the United States federal government needs to be allocating more money to the research and development activities, this is a Democratic Party policy position that continues to miss the point. It is another example of why I believe that Rahm Emanuel is an okay candidate for the Democratic Party by focusing on certain factors such as research and development, unlike certain other Democratic Party candidates. But because he's mired in quasi-socialistic positions, such as the federal government being involved, he is always going to fail as a general election candidate versus Republican Party principles of having private industry be unleashed and lead the way. It's why a candidate such as Ronald Reagan is going to always succeed ultimately against a Walter Mondale, because there's that fundamental dichotomy of having less government control and less government restraint on the economy. Certainly, we understand that comes as a consequence. Less regulation means that there's less government direction in certain areas. That may come at a cost, but ultimately, history has proven that if you allow private industry to do what private industry does, it's going to somewhat magically develop technologies and processes because creative juices are unleashed. Understand as well that if you go down the path of having the federal government lead research and development, there are the following consequences. First, who then gets to benefit from whatever research and development, if you will, takes place, or outcome? Do we then license that technology to some private industry? Does the federal government then become deployed as a competitor in the economy with respect to those technologies? It makes no sense. There is no process that is established whereby the federal government, in doing research and development or funding research and development, is then going to turn around and develop those technologies or productive capacities into the economy like a private industry consortium or company is able to do. Here's the second problem. If you go down the path of having the federal government be the investor in research and development, that money has to come from somewhere, which means that money is coming from tax dollars. And for the most part, those tax dollars are going to be hitting the lower economic ranges harder than the higher income folks. Why is that the case? Because right now we don't have any money. We have a federal deficit that is the size, if not greater, the entire United States economy. It means that we are going to be spending every dollar right now on federal government research and development is a dollar that is adding to the deficit. And while it is argued that higher income individuals pay more taxes, higher federal deficits hit the lower income people more than higher income people. Why is that the case? It means that more money is diverted in terms of the federal budget to paying down interest on the deficit spending. That's money that could have been spent on social programs. That's money that could be spent on school lunches or other incentivization programs for inner-city economic development. So right now, Democratic Party and independents need to understand that when you increase the federal deficit, you are hitting the lower income people harder than anybody else. This is a fundamental message that centrist Democratic candidates should be harping on, and every Republican Party candidate out there should be talking about every single day. We need federal deficit reduction, and we don't need programs such as massive research and development allocations that is federal deficit spending that is potentially competing with private industry. In fact, what we need is less taxation and more incentivization for research and development, whether it be capital gains, tax reductions, or other special incentivization programs that continues to unleash private industry exploration of new developments and new technologies so that we have the ability to compete against the Chinese, the Japanese, the South Koreans, and in Europe with respect to developments. When it comes to Europe, for example, it is a great study in how not to do things. If you look at the entire European Union, first of all, their economy continues to stagnate as well. Their emphasis on green technologies has been a tremendous detriment to their growth. If you look at the top 10 technology companies in the world, the European Union is hardly represented. The European Union is falling behind, consistent with Japan, in terms of their economic development, while the United States, through their tech industries in particular, are outstripping by economic growth dimensions both the European Union and the other Western countries by leaps and bounds. We do not want to replicate a European Union socialistic framework in the United States. It would be a tremendous deficit to our economy and to our federal deficit as well. This also applies at some level to health care. And while I say at some level, I think that there is an appropriate level of medical facility build out that is spearheaded by the federal government in our top 50 metropolitan sectors. And if we do that and we combine it with private industry, reduce the level of legal liability to those institutions, we are then diverting potentially emergency room attendants by people that can't pay for medical care into these other facilities. Those types of programs, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to other public goods such as education, and in instituting greater rationality into those systems, reducing prescriptive drug pricing, those types of measures are absolutely appropriate when it comes to government involvement. But it is absolutely inappropriate to do that in general science. I'm not saying that you can't have any element of academic incentivization or funding by the federal government into certain of our collegiate and university institutions. I think those probably need to be minimized. We don't, however, want in any way, shape, or form the federal government competing against private industry and research and development. We want the federal government to institute policies to serve private industry, to foster research and development. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe. This is Steve Gibson reporting. I hope to hear from you as well by your comments with respect to this subject and others that I report.